Good evening, everybody. You're all very welcome to this webinar. My name is John McGinnity, and I'm a guidance counsellor here at the Institute of Education. And we're delighted that you could join us this evening. I'll be joined by my colleague, Jack Henderson. And at the moment, as we speak, Jack is just pulling together the slides so that we are very keen that you can see the slides, obviously, and that we record it for you. So please note that everything we say and everything we go through this evening, Jack and myself, we'll actually be able to share out with you tomorrow. We'll send you through the full recording and all of the comments as well. So one of the things just to say in terms of the operation of this evening, we'll probably be talking for about 40 minutes or so. I think the really important piece is the opportunity for yourself to ask me any questions at all. If you have any questions, just please put them into the chat box. One of the things I'd be saying is that I'm not in a rush away, so I'll be able to take any questions as we go along in terms of the aspect. I mean, this evening's topic is very important. I'm conscious that the young person in your household is joining about 60,000 other young people across the country who will be doing the Leaving Certificate. And as we know, it's a very difficult, a very stressful year. And what we wish to do this evening is to be able to reassure you as parents as to what would be the strategies and what would be the opportunities and things that you can actually do to assist the young person in your household. I'll be drawing on a number of things, one of them being the students that I work with here on a daily basis in the Institute of Education in terms of helping them get through the Leaving Cert and this period of time as best they can. I suppose my own studies then as guidance counsellor and also in areas like CBT and reality therapy and choice theory. But I suppose most importantly is the aspect whereby I've had 3 children ourselves. We've had 3 children going through the Leaving Certificate and going on in the next steps in their lives and being very conscious of the aspect whereby it's a very difficult, a very busy household as they get through the Leaving Certificate. So in terms of the topics we'll be covering this evening, we'll be covering the common difficulties that you'll be finding in terms of the studies, the common difficulties that they will be encountering. The aspect, and I think the philosophy that I'll be suggesting is a household approach, effectively covering all aspects of yourself as a parent and parents, the young person in your household, and working together, because we are conscious that there's other siblings in the household, and it's bringing that together to make sure that things go as smoothly as possible. The aspect around key messages I'll be sharing as well, and then conclusions on the Q&A as well. So just to mention the aspect of a framework of understanding. And one of the things that we know is that the Leaving Certificate is a stressful period. And for students and for households, there's an inevitability of acceptance that there is that element of increased stress. But then the aspect whereby it's basically coming, thank you, Jack, in terms of the slides. So if you wanted to go on to the next slide and the next one again. Thank you very much. It's just the aspect of a framework of understanding to be able to work with. And one of the things is a knowledge and a certainty that there will be an end to this in terms of the Leaving Certificate, as we know. It sounds as though, yes, that's obvious, but it is so important to be aware that there is an additional stress that will be encountered, but it is for a defined and known period of time, and then preparing for it. And just in terms of helping you as a parent to understand that there's a sort of a basic sort of fundamental understanding, what happens is our thoughts and our thinking is very much linked to how we feel and our emotions. And our feelings and emotions are very much linked to what we do and our behavior. And that of itself is very much linked to our own physiology and our bodies. So there's a sense of a loop whereby our thinking does affect our feeling, does affect what we do, and does affect our bodies. And it's all an interconnected loop. And so crucially, at a very fundamental level, it's understanding to understand that there is 2 aspects. So in some sense, when we are confident and when the young person in your household has a level of confidence, that feeds through all aspects of their feeling and their thoughts, and their behaviors and their bodies. And obviously, when it's the converse of that, what can happen is it then becomes an ever vicious cycle whereby the thoughts are feeding in and it's feeding on itself. So when we're going through this evening, you'll find that I'll be saying, I suppose, tips and strategies to help that thinking for you as a parent and for the young person in your household, that thinking about this project that's underway, a very important project over the next 2 months, but also being aware that the aspect and the demeanor will actually feed on itself as well. So it's very, very important to be aware that our thoughts interconnected with our feelings, the things we do, and then our own physiology and our body. And there's very much a loop, an interconnected loop. Thanks, Jack. We'll go on to the next slide, please. So what we find, and we know it ourselves, that when we're under stress and when we're under pressure, there's a number of things that can happen. I mean, obviously, our attention span and our ability to communicate, our ability to listen, our ability to take anything in is just not there because we're just caught in a trap. There's the aspect whereby, in terms of our own bodies and how we feel, a sense of a knot in our stomach. It could be chest pains. The students that I meet, when I chat through with them, they present with different aspects. Sometimes it's the aspect of nausea. Sometimes it's the aspect of chest pain. Sometimes the aspect of a sense of unable to take a breath, a sense of a panic attack. There's a range of things that can happen. The sense of not being able to eat or overeat. The sense of miscommunication, and basically that household is under stress. And the question is, how can we kind of help to come out of that? And these are the sort of presenting issues. But for each person, as we know, it can be different for each person. And about 3,000-4,000 years ago, the Stoic philosophers came to the conclusion that events of themselves are not causing the stress. It's often how we perceive the event. And you'll find that as a parent, it may be that you've had an older young person in your house who is already, and each of your siblings or each of your children will have they'll encounter the leave insert, albeit it's the same leave insert. They can encounter it in different ways. And how each of us, the same thing can happen to people, and one person can be very stressed from it and one person less so. And it's the actual, not the event, but the perception of the event that is key to our understanding. Thanks, Jack. We'll go on to the next strategy, next piece here. So one of the pieces I think that we certainly would be encouraging you as a parent is really to be a supporter, to be on the sidelines, to know that, let them know that you have their back. You're there for them. You're there to help, to support. And in a sense, those as innate human beings are loved and cherished. And okay, they're going through the process and trying to do their best. But deep down, you love them. And that sense of care and support is an underpinning piece. I mean, we often think in terms of a sporting analogy, whereby people are striving for Olympic medals or striving for to be the best or striving for to be competitive. I often just say to students, when they're going through this period of time, that really what they're trying to strive for is to be their personal best, just to be the best that they can be. And each day, to start each day trying to be the best they can be and getting through each day. And it can seem like a long 8 weeks, the whole piece now, but it is really a case of a day-by-day approach and them trying to be doing their personal best, but knowing that there's a huge support in the household for them to get through it. Emotional resilience we hear about, and you know, there's a sense of, well, what is it? Inevitably, there's the aspect whereby all of the students across the country are undertaking the Leaving Certificate. It is a process where they're going through it and having difficulty with it and trying their best. There's no shall we say, workaround, unfortunately, on this, and I'll be coming later on to various pathways beyond the point system. But in terms of the Leaving Cert itself, there's not the piece on this. So it's about building that resilience for them and being aware that it is difficult and an acknowledgement of that, but building their resilience on this. One of the things I'd be saying as a parent as well is the sense of the young person. The familiarity is so, so important. And what we find ourselves is that when we're familiar with things, it kind of notches down the stress levels that can emerge. So in some way, even the process of having gone through the mocks and having taken the long papers and actually having encountered all of the questions, and I'm conscious not in every school, in all schools, the full curriculum might not have been finished, but the process, and I think it's that reassurance to the student, to the young person in your house, to say they have come through a very difficult mock exams, and okay, the results may not have gone as good as they wished for, but there's wonderful learning from even the aspect of having gone through the mocks and coming out the other end. There's that piece of getting through it. And I think one of the other things, just to say, Jack, just go back to the previous slide there, please. One of the things just to say is the piece around the mock results in terms of some of the important subjects like Irish, English and maths, and all of the subjects are important. But if students were getting, let's say, an O8 or a H8 or a H8 or H7, there is a piece around as a parent and as a student and talking to the teacher about the capacity to take the honours and that piece. And the other thing went then is oral exams. And as we know, the oral exams were contributing 40% in the case of Irish and 25% in the case of the other languages. It is important to reassure your young person that that was a difficult period leading up to the orals. Certainly we find it here in the schools, certainly we found it at home. The oral exams were a very stressful period leading up to the oral exams. But our students get through it, and in our own house, our students got through it. It is very stressful, but there's a sense of, yes, this will pass. And I think it's reassuring them of that. So the familiarity of those exams, of the mocks, the familiarity of the orals, very important to draw support and an understanding that I felt stressed at the time. It was difficult, but I did get through it. And I think that's important. We might go on to the next slide if we could, Jack, please. So one of the things, and I'll just cover this briefly, but it is important to, and we as parents will know this, but it's a very difficult, because what can happen is students and young people sometimes overwork, shall we say, and it is so important to keep the balance right. And I know in some cases you might perceive as a parent the aspect whereby they're doing too much work, or you might perceive that they're not doing enough work, and we'll come to that in a moment. But I think there's an important role for you in terms of sense of when they come through the door in the evening, that there is a very supportive environment being created, because it's a place of refuge that they're going to coming through. Because in the school day, it's very pressurized. In the school day, it's very busy. There's a whole piece around their friends and so on and so forth. But when they're coming through the door, it's so important. And getting the balance right, as we know, between diet and exercise and phones. One of the things that we often say to students is about phones, and I can appreciate it, but often our students are using the phones as a learning device, and they're using it because they're listening. They might be recording bits that they're playing back for themselves. But when it is obviously interfering with their sleeping patterns, then that's something that just won't work. So sleep and diet and exercise in terms of balanced meals, the aspect of breakfast and water, the aspect of not overindulging in caffeine and caffeine drinks, so important. And each student will come to something that works for them. Whatever it is the piece that they enjoy, the bit of relaxation. I remember in our own household, it was like there was a program that was every evening before the exams, and our daughter would just sit down and just relax for that from, say, 9 o'clock till 10 o'clock. whatever it is that they feel is working for them, so important to support them in that. And inevitably, and I can appreciate we're trying to get healthy meals, but inevitably young people will have a treat or something that they really enjoy at this period. And in each case, we certainly would have had the house, almost the drawers and the presses full of that as a backup, because one of the things is that piece of support is so important. And I think in some way, while the phones will be a very positive influence in terms of connections with friends, it also just has to be, in a sense, and I know that's a difficult dialogue, to kind of understand what's the right approach with phones, but certainly if it's interfering with sleep over the next period of time. Because when students work to the extent whereby there's a pivot point beyond which in the evening or at night, the concentration lapses and there's diminishing returns. So the extra time they're putting into it is not time well served. They're safer off get sleep and be ready for the next day. It's very difficult at the time for them to appreciate this, but there's a diseconomies. There's a sense whereby when you're tired, you're not being effective. So it's about being healthy and ready for each day. We might move on to the next slide, please, Jack. So here is, I suppose, a very important piece that we want to share with you. And it is the difference between being present in the kitchen and actually being a physical body in the kitchen, and being a person who's ready to listen to your son or daughter, to the young person in the house. And they're two different things. So there's a huge difference between what's called listening compared to attentive listening or active listening. And absolutely over the next 8 weeks is a very, very important time for you to tune in, because sometimes they may not want to say anything. And sometimes they want to talk a lot, but at those moments when they want to talk to you, it is so important to switch on, to listen attentively to what it is they're saying. Because if you're distracted, you'll only hear half of what they said. And it would be frustrating for them because they'll be thinking, I said it and you didn't hear me. And so more than ever, the next 2 months is a period of time when you're really turning on and tuning in to hear what it is they're saying. The policing of study, I just to say, nobody better than the student themselves to understand the volume of work that they need to do. Importantly, there's a self-regulation of allocation of time among students and subjects. So what I find here is the student will say to me, it's subject A and subject B, they're the two subjects I need to put more effort in. So they're very alert themselves. They're very aware of where they need to put the work in. Work needs more attention, what can do with less attention. And that sense of ownership, the sense of self-agency, allow that, because they'll have a good sense. Obviously, they may want to tic-tac with you on it, and you're there to listen and to guide with them. I have it on a slide, on a further slide, but there's a piece around comparison is the thief of joy. And when we're thinking, or when a student's thinking, everybody else is doing more than me, or everybody else is doing less than me, the aspect of comparison, so the sense of each student has to build their own study plan, put together their own approach for each day and for each week, and that's something that they will build. And trying to keep up with other friends and is won't work, because it only adds an extra layer of stress. One of the things I most want to say to you as a parent, that there was a time when the Leaving Cert was the only show, and in that aspect was there was only a CAO points and so on. But it's so prevalent now that we hear about different pathways through college, and that sense whereby there are routes through, yes, the CEO, and there's level 8 honours degrees, but also now increasingly there's a range of level 6 courses that have progression to those level 8 courses. There's a whole range of PLC courses that have progression to level 6s and level 8s. There's a new national tertiary office, there's new apprenticeships. So there's a range of different things. So the sense whereby the Leaving Cert and the points and the sense of one door to a college, that's broadening. And it's so important to be able to share that with students so that they feel there are many different options, and we'll explore that further as we go on. What you find, and certainly we found in our own household, is that siblings have approached stress and approached the workload and in different ways. And obviously, there's a piece whereby when one person in the house is doing the Leaving Cert, it's affecting everybody in the house. But recognizing that and being there to support the person who's going through the exams for this year is a very important piece, while not dismissing your time for the other siblings, but they'll appreciate that that's the sharing of your time at this period. And I think importantly, what I was saying about earlier on, the things that they enjoy. So all of the kids, all of the students will have particular, treats that they enjoy. And I think it's absolutely good to shower them with that at the moment to get through this period of additional stress. And then celebrating. So important to stitch in time to celebrate the finishing of school, to celebrate the finishing of exams, and just building it into your diary so that you have that time for them to recognize and be able to celebrate, because these are huge moments in their lives. And by you signaling that you have the time and creating the time, it's so important. Thanks for that, Jack. We'll take the next slide if that's okay. There's a useful framework that I would suggest you consider, and the acronym is RALLY. So it's just RALLY. And that sense of, particularly over the next couple of months, creating a sense yourself whereby you are alert to firstly recognize, to understand when there are under significant layers of stress, when you are able to recognize and say, I'm sensing you are very stressed. That sense of, I can feel it, I can sense it. So important to acknowledge, because often a student might feel, I'm overwhelmed, but nobody seems to appreciate what I'm going through. So to be able to recognize it is important, and to signal that you've recognized it, to signal that you acknowledge and you kind of understand it. Importantly, to listen, and we talk about the active listening that I mentioned earlier. And I think as parents, we inevitably jump into solution mode. We tend to hear what's the issue and then jump to try and solve it. But in fact, often the young person in your house doesn't want you to jump in and solve it. They just want you to recognize that they're having a difficult time, to acknowledge that they're having a difficult time, to listen to what they're going through, and then allowing that take its course and going from there. But the aspect where you have to feel as though you are jumping in all the time to create the solutions is almost disempowering, can be disempowering, because perhaps that's not what they wish you to do at all. They just want you to listen. Obviously, if you get to the point whereby you feel that there is something, that you have to escalate, or something that is so important, and we'll look at the support slides in a moment, but obviously let somebody know if you feel is there something more. And it might be the GP, it might be the guidance counsellor in the school. So obviously you'll understand and you'll appreciate that level yourself, but just to be aware of that. Importantly for you as a parent and guardian is your own approach. So obviously if you're very stressed and you're meeting stress with stress, that probably is not the calm environment that you wish for that will be helping. So it is an approach whereby you have to be as calm as you possibly can be, because obviously if the young person in your household sees that you're stressed, that will feed into their stress. So almost a demeanor of calmness, yes, a concern, but a calmness demeanor will certainly help. And then you can appreciate yourself. So all of the things that we talk about for the young person in terms of minding themselves, in terms of compassion and self-care, is very, very important for you in this period of time. So it's not, I suppose, if you can, the aspect of taking on additional responsibility where you can actually try to leave the next 8 weeks to maybe create as much time as you possibly can, to allow yourself be as free as you can. But I appreciate people have very busy jobs and so on, and very busy lives. So it's very hard to step off that treadmill. But if you, where you can, if you can be as present as possible, that's going to be a very positive aspect for the young person in your house. Thanks, Jack. We'll go on to the next slide, please. So I just wanted to take a moment to share a short mindfulness exercise. So if you feel that either yourself or the young person in your house is a sense of overwhelm, a sense of not being able to cope, a feeling of huge anxiety, one of the things that can help here is even for 3 minutes, because you might say, I don't have time. But listen, in terms of one of the things in a 3-minute period, the first minute would be simply saying, okay, I'll ground myself. So that's the aspect of sitting comfortably, making sure your feet are firmly on the floor, maybe closing your eyes, awareness of your thoughts and emotions and physical sensations. What you'll find is you're going to not allow you try to solve anything or change anything while you're in that minute. So you're just allowing those thoughts to come through. There might be sort of like clouds in the sky, or there's a sort of a river with twigs on it and it's just going by. But you're just allowing that sense of the thoughts and grounding yourself. You're just being aware for that minute of time. And then secondly, there's an aspect of focusing on your breathing. So what I'd be saying is, with one hand on your chest and one hand then on your tummy, breathing in for 7 seconds and then breathing out for 9 seconds. Now, the reason we're saying breathe out for that little bit longer is to let the air exhale from your body. But it'll be amazing the feeling you'll get in that moment whereby you're allowing yourself oxygenate your body across those 7 seconds, and then allowing your breath go out through your body, the 9 seconds going out through your body. And then we move to the third minute of this 3-minute mindfulness exercise. And it's what's called a body scan, the aspect of being able to say, okay, I have 4 limbs, and you can kind of consciously think of your toes and then coming back through your ankles and moving up through each of your limbs for 15 seconds each, and your fingers and your wrists and your hands moving up slowly, but being very conscious of those parts of your body. And what you'll find is that after a 3-minute period of time, there's a piece whereby you will become more grounded in yourself, more present, more calm, and then a piece whereby the aspect of being ready for your day ahead. And I think that's so important, that the aspect of taking those time, that few minutes, to be able to say, I'll actually be able to work and meet the day. And that's so important for yourself. But then equally also for the young person in your household and the student and your son and daughter, to be able to say, well, okay, I can appreciate you're under a lot of pressure, a lot of stress. And this could be something that they may do in their own time or in a room, or whereby they can get some space. But there's a huge benefit from giving a person that time, giving you that time, so that you're able to get ready for the day. And so it's a short mindfulness exercise that takes 3 minutes. The first minute is almost just allowing yourself get grounded, your feet just sitting comfortably, allowing yourself just close your eyes, allowing the thoughts that are coming in, just let them float away like clouds. Then moving on to the breathing for a minute, the 7 seconds in and 9 seconds out to let yourself exhale. And then moving on again to being aware of each of your 4 limbs for 15 seconds each. And what you'll find is when you come back from that, you'll be ready for the next stage of the day ahead of you. Jack, we might move on to the next slide if that's okay. And one of the things, and I know in some way there's conversations with your son or daughter, with the young person in your house, And there is a difficulty, and often, and please put any questions you have maybe in the chat box, and I can pick them up here at the end, or Jack, you'll be able to kind of give me the questions and I'll be able to take them, and I'll be able to probably see them as well here as well. One of the things is that sense of reflections from the mocks and being able to be honest and saying, well, what is it I need to work on? And basically that honesty in terms of reflections and changes. And I know that's a sort of a continuous piece, but it's so important to allow students each day to refine their timetable. The aspect of flexibility, because they may be a program that they want to watch, a match that they want to play in, whatever it is, to allow that flexibility in their timetable and for it to be realistic. I did mention earlier on about the familiarity, the aspect of a student saying, I know I was stressed at Christmas. I know I was stressed during the mocks. I recall I was stressed. But a sense of a calmness that says, but I actually got through it. It's something that I knew. I recall the study, I recall the exams, and I kind of I have a familiarity of it. In the school, I know where the exams are going to be. I have a sense of the hall, I have a sense of the logistics. And one of the things that we often would say is it is so important for a student, for a young person, to have something that they know is positive, encouraging for themselves, and something that's true, a kind of a statement that says, I've got this, or I know that section, or I know a positive piece that gives them that little bit of confidence. And it's almost a mantra that's in their head, because there will be a voice that says they're not ready, but often it's a case of saying, so what is it we want to displace that with something that's positive, saying, yes, I've worked hard, yes, I know. And it may be that sense of just giving themselves a voice that's that confidence piece to get through this period of difficulty over the next while. I mentioned here about comparing ourselves and students to each other's, that part around often a student might see other students as working much harder, working much longer. But in a sense, for each student, it's only for them being their best, their personal best. So one of the things is coming back to themselves being the best that they can be. They can't be more than that. And not trying to be somebody else. There's a sense of there's only one of them, they're unique, and being there for themselves, and you being there as a support for them is very, very important. What can happen often is those worries, the sense of stress, even when students are taking some downtime, even when they're going out for a walk, even when they're with their friends. And what I would be trying to encourage them is saying that sense of worry, to try and enjoy the breaks, enjoy the fresh air, enjoy the downtime, enjoy the film, enjoy what it is they do as an antidote to the study, as an antidote to the stresses of the Leaving Cert. And yes, there's worries and stresses, but feed that into when they're sitting down to plan and to put together the timetable, but to allow themselves enjoy the time with their friends, enjoy the time with the walk that they're on, and let the worry time for another time to enjoy that period of time. Chuck, we might go on to the next slide if that's okay. And one of the things that we'll find is that inevitably it's about getting the balance right. And nobody better to be able to call this but the student themselves. On the one hand, obviously, overexhaustion has a negative impact on their feeling, and anything they're working on won't stick, won't go through. So what I would describe as the Goldilocks approach, the sense of getting the balance right, doing the right amount, and being careful to just strike the right balance. Being aware that, yes, it's going to be stressful, but the sense of, well, I'm putting a plan together. The aspect of, I know it can be stressful and I've approaches that will help me get through this. And I think importantly, what we find often is for students, particularly students maybe who are neurodiverse, the sense whereby when the school finishes and that gap between the school finishing and the structure of the school day and the exams, that sort of 2-week period, particularly for both neurotypical and neurodiverse students, a structure to the day is very, very important for that period, because there's a lack of structure that would have been there when school finishes. So it's important to build that in. And one of the things that I mentioned earlier is the sense of creating the space to do the things that are enjoyable, because often a student will feel better when they go back to the books, go back to the study, that they've had the break, and they'll feel better. Or if it's something that they're going to watch later on in the evening, they'll put the effort in earlier to get it done before they can sit down and relax. So that's a very important process to work through. And one of the things that we find here, and absolutely with our students, is they learn in different ways. And some of them are very visual and will be writing in diagrams and notes and graphs. And others are oral and like to kind of talk through the kind of aspects, and then reading and kinesthetic learning by doing. So how people learn will be different. And just be aware that you might have a range of students and children in your house, and with different learning styles, and what will suit one student may not suit another, and as they go. So it's just to be conscious of that. There's a part around practicing exam papers, obviously, at this time, because what that is building is familiarity. It's also being aware of the time allocation and the marking schemes. And one of the things that we find is sometimes students will come to me after the mocks and say, I actually overspent. I stayed on a particular question too long, and I should have moved on to another question. Absolutely, if they've learned that through the mocks, so important to bring that into the main exams now, to be aware of the structure of the exam, and you can just chat through that with them. The various aspects of section, it might be that they answered one question from section A and two from section B, and sometimes a student might, in the rush, find that they've answered two questions in section A and one in B, and that's a very problem. So basically, it's making sure they know the structure of the paper and then allocate the time. If there's two questions and they're 20 minutes each, it's so important to allocate 20 minutes to each question if they have the same marks, because 30 minutes on one question and 20 minutes on the other will inevitably lead to less marks overall, because the easiest marks to get will be in the first section, the first 20 minutes of the first 10 minutes or so. And by adding extra time, you're not picking up the additional marks. You're safer take that time into the next question, and you'll gather up more marks quickly by moving to the next question and then coming back to that if there's time at the end. Thanks, Jack. I think we'll go on to the next piece if that's okay. Obviously, I just wanted to move then to June. Please just have that timetable. It's all over the school here, as we know, that sense of just for students to be aware of the rooms that they're going to be in and the timetable, but also on the fridge or in the house or wherever, just have everything ready and organized and know the exam timetable and layout. And inevitably, it's the moment, whatever route they take to the school, whatever route they take to the exam center, absolutely build in extra time. For the first morning, the students have to, present identity and do extra things. So they have to be there earlier on the first morning. So very, very important to build in extra time each day, particularly on the first morning. It's not the time to be kind of delayed. So it's so important, because there's a period of time that students are not admitted to the exam. So they definitely should be there on time. As I say, know the structure of the paper, the layout and the timings, and I've gone through that. Having everything ready from the night before, because again, you don't want to be kind of worrying about that on the morning of the exam, and having all of the things that they're required to bring to the exam center. I mentioned about the instructions, so important to double check in those first few minutes of the exam to make sure the various sections and the various topics that they have to cover. I often say to students is start with what you know best first to build that confidence. So what is it, the piece on the paper that you feel you can tackle that will go well for you, and that you can actually just build confidence from that? So basically, a little tip is to start with something that they know. If they feel as though they're struggling and very stressed and can't concentrate, the piece of breathing even for a minute at that stage where they're able to just concentrate and get the breathing right, that will allow there more clarity. So important. What I'd say is so important as well, the aspect whereby what we found in our own students at home, our own kids at home, is that for each of them, they came back with exams, different exams that went much worse than they had hoped for. And what you'll find is it can be different exams. So inevitably there'll be a bit of recognition when they come through the door or they've sent it on the WhatsApp that it hasn't gone well. And to be able to just to sit with that and allow them just get it off their chest. They're just going to say, that was awful, that sense of, but hearing it, there's a piece around not a post-mortem, but just to be listening to the sense that this was a particularly tough paper and just to listen to that before moving on to the next one. Or there might be aspects of learning from it in terms of time allocation. One of the things, obviously, is not overindulging in postmortems. Inevitably, you're probably aware that the trend and pattern of grades at H1 and H2 and O1 and O2 across all the subjects, across all the years, tends to be relatively similar. And there has been years whereby maybe the maths exam was seen as catastrophic in June, and yet when the results came through in August, there was a sense of equilibrium very much close to the previous year's grade. So you never know on the day. There could be, a sense of a trauma from the exam, but it is about listening to that, but also allowing the piece of moving on to the next exam and focusing on the next exam. I think we'll go on to the next piece, if that's okay. Jack, thank you. One of the things, and it's really just to help you as a parent, the sense of and I can appreciate the leave insert, but increasingly students, once they know there are options, once they know there are other things, and particularly we would see it here in school, that the CEO isn't for every student. So obviously, on the one hand, we want to be able to say, yes, there's choices, and those choices could be in the CEO or UCAS or PLC or apprenticeship, a whole range of, there's a new set of courses on the National Tertiary Office, so that's nto.ie is the website, and there's new programs coming on that through the further education and higher education. So what's happened is over the last, say, 10, 15 years, there's been a huge range of different options have come through for students after their leave insert, which has really been very beneficial. In terms of the CEO itself, just to say to you as a parent, to know that the change of mind is now open, but it will close on the 1st of July. And students can change their choices, and I'd be suggesting that they maybe tweak them at this stage, but then set it aside and pick it up, because there's a week after the leave insert. And about 40,000 people changed their mind in the last week. And maybe they're just tweaking different things, but there is going to be scope at the after the leave insert to actually finalize the CEO choices. And obviously the core mantra is to place the choices in genuine order of preference. So that's so important. If your son or daughter has applied for exemptions from, say, the NUI or from Trinity College for UCD or Maynooth or Cork or Galway or NCAD or RCSI on the NUI, or for language waiver from Trinity or from UL, or that aspect in terms of languages, just to check that that's in place and that you've checked for that in terms of exemptions. The NUI and the Trinity exemptions will be on the CEO record, statement of record. I mentioned about the aspect then of post-leaving certificate, which are level 5 further education colleges, and many of the one-year courses lead back into a linked progression to a level 8 or a level 6-7 course in the CEO. So many students are taking a year to work through a level 5, and it might be they've an interest in law or business or engineering or science, and they're doing that as a year and then progressing on from that. That often happens. I just want to mention here around the timeline. So the leaving certificate results will be coming out on the 22nd of August. The CEO round one offers will be the middle of the following week. And while the students will be away maybe on their summer holidays or after their post-leaving certificate holiday, I think as a family, if you can, is to be available and around it towards the end of August, because there's often things around different offers. Maybe accommodation is needed because they've applied for a college course that's away from home. And it's a period of time whereby, ideally, if they're around and with you and everybody's in the house, it's a wonderful time. So if you can build in the last week in August to be around it, it's so important, and to be there for them. I think we'll move on to the next slide, if that's okay, Jack. And I just wanted to pull together the aspect of allowing autonomy, as we mentioned. The school guidance counsellor will basically work through personal and also vocational and also educational needs. In some schools, there's a sort of a pastoral, social personal person who looks after the pastoral side of things, and then other guidance counsellors on the vocational side. So depending on, have a conversation with the guidance counsellor in school. Here, I have a great colleague, Jane Dalton, who's head of pastoral and safeguarding on the pastoral side. There's a whole range of people that your son or daughter can talk to within the school environment. Obviously, it's escalating if you feel it's a GP in terms of advice that's needed. Absolutely be prepared to take that escalation if needed. So there is that balance of autonomy. But if you feel there's something that needs to be checked out, absolutely take the next steps. And just on the next slide, we're going to show you now the HSE. Sorry, that'll be at the end. Apologies. There's a slide I have at the end in terms of the HSE resources. We'll go on to the next slide, Jack, if that's okay, in terms of the wrap up and to kind of finish off before we go into the question section. One of the things that I kind of started by saying, there is 60,000 students doing the Leave Insert, but for each individual unique student, the student that's your son or daughter, the student in the young person in your household is unique. How they perceive the Leave Insert would be very different from what has gone before and other students. It's because it's a very much an individual thing. It's an appreciation on their part of preparing for the Leave Insert, being ready to prepare for the study that's involved, but also preparing for the aspect of stress, a sense of familiarity that there was a stressful period through the mocks and through the orals, and an awareness that it is going to be that, but also an awareness that it's for a defined period of time. And what you find is that students, when they get through the first exam, that familiarity of the exam hall, the exam centre, the aspect of answering the question, the aspect of the logistics. So I suppose as a parent, just to be ready for the heightened aspect into the first exam. But once they get the first exam over, each subsequent exam is ever decreasing in terms of stress levels normally. The aspect of the 3 Ps, I call it as a parent, the positivity, the praise, the provision of supports, they're so key. That sense of you're there in a very supportive environment. You want to support. There's this aspect of whatever it is, there's additional needs that they may wish for this period, to be there with them for that. I talked about the aspect of one-to-one communication time, whereby active listening is so important. The physical presence to be in the kitchen isn't enough. It's being present, but also being ready to listen. Not necessarily to jump into solution focus mode, to maybe bite your tongue, maybe hold back, because often it might be a sense of, I just want to let off steam. I just want to complain about ABC, and then just allow that rather than jumping in to try and solve it. One of the things is, as we talk about the aspect of the Leave Insert and the various options that are there, so it's keeping that perspective. And then the aspect of the being alert and connecting in with the school resources if needed. Just on the next slide, if that's okay, Jack, we'll just put up the additional resources slide, because I am conscious for the many families or many parents and students who are maybe joining us in this evening, that I just wanted to share these are additional resources that I got, and I just wanted to share them just to reinforce again that we'll be sending these, the video out to everybody who was registered for the slot this evening. So you don't have to worry about taking any of this down, because you'll get it tomorrow morning from our colleague Charlotte Campbell in the morning and tomorrow, so you'll have that. And then we just go to the last slide, Jack, if that's okay, and come back into the room, and we'll be able to take any questions. So I just want to say thanks, Jack. Thank you very much for that, and for everybody joining us in this evening. And we'll now open it up to any questions, either on chat, maybe on the chat panel, if that's okay. Thank you. So Jack, if you wouldn't mind, are there any questions there at all coming through on the chat or in the Q&A? I can see.
Now I can't see any.
Yeah, and I'm just checking the chat as well, folks. If there was any questions coming in, we'll just keep an eye on them here for a few minutes, if there were any questions at all. Thank you very much. Thank you. So there's one Q&A, I think. There's something. So there's a question just in, I hope you're hearing it okay, around the first CEO offer that you get. So let me just explain that. What happens in the CEO, it has a level 8 list and a level 7/6 list. And so there's 2 lists. And at the exact same moment, a student, if they're entitled to, they get the highest offer on each list. And what happens then is that you have a week in round 1 to decide which of those you wish for. And please know that, for instance, if it's the first preference, everything below is deleted. If it's your third preference, say, everything between 4 and 10 is deleted. So let's say you got the third preference on each list. The rule is you can accept either of those, not both of them, but one of them in that round. So the question you have, which is, do you have to take the first CEO offer? What I'll be saying is, obviously, if a student says, that's an offer I wish for, absolutely accept it, and accept it before the deadline. It doesn't stop you still being in play for round 2 and round 3 and round 4 for higher offers. So everything below is gone, but everything above is still in play. And in the second round, if the college makes more offers and the points fall, and it falls to the level that your son or daughter, their points, they will move up to their second or first. And in the next week in round 2, they'll get their first or second choice. They're not under an obligation to take 1 or 2. They can stay on their third choice, or they can move up to their first choice. So I hope I've explained that okay. There's some new posts coming in. I'm just going to keep an eye on the question. Yeah, there's just somebody asking about sharing the record of this webinar. Yes, it is. So it's gone out to everybody who's registered tomorrow. So you'll have the slides, and you'll also have the full webinar as well. And thank you very much for those questions that are coming through. Okay, so we have a question which is a student who's studying until 10 and then an hour on the phone, and then has trouble sleeping properly, lots of headaches. So there's a couple of things I'd be saying here. Obviously 10 o'clock is an absolutely suitable time to stop studying. She may feel that social interaction for the hour on the phone is important to her. It may be that genuinely that's a very important social period. That sense of a connection, whatever it is she feels, is a de-stressor for herself. But my advice then would be a recognition and a conversation that says the phone then ends up away from her bedside table. Now, obviously, a student would say to me, but I need it, John, for my alarm. And so it's very hard to say, yes, you do, or yes, you don't, because there could be other people in the house or not. So, but I'd often say the phone needs to be away from the bedside table, on somewhere else in the room, to allow your daughter get the sleep she needs. Now, obviously, she's saying, you're mentioning here she has lots of headaches. Some of that could be the aspect of stress. But we have to be so careful because there's a piece here around, a GP, a medical piece. So if you felt as though like headaches is something we need to be very careful about. And so I think there would be an aspect of escalating that to a GP as well. So just be careful to say, yes, it may be stress, but we have to be so careful with headaches that it could be something else and to get it checked out. I hope that's helping. So just to reinforce the aspect of allowing your daughter to have the social time, but also an awareness then she has to get the time to sleep as well. Thank you for that question. Um, how should they handle a longer exam time when they have exams, but they are burnt out after? Okay, so there's a lovely question here, which is the piece around the length of the leave insert and the risk of burnout. Literally, it is a pacing. And one of the things we'd be saying is in the run up to the first week of exams, a concentration on the subjects for the first week, because they'll be able to plan that themselves. I think it is so important that when they come home after those exams, to take the time just to detox, to take the time just to sit on the couch, just to kind of unwind completely. There is the element whereby the exams will be staged out. There's the weekends because it's happening over 3 weeks. So to avoid the burnout, it's the capacity of a sort of a timetable that doesn't allow burnout. And there will be the gaps, and to allow those gaps. So I hope I'm helping here. I'm conscious that I might come back to this question, but just at the beginning, what we find here is that the students will start stretching it out. And when they're stretching out, they'll have a time for the evening to kind of detox that evening, and then maybe start into the next day, so to avoid that burnout. I have here a question, which is my daughter is fixated with going to one college and she's picking courses because they're in that college and not courses that she's interested in elsewhere. How can I talk to her about considering other colleges? What I would say on that is that it can be a common occurrence whereby students will say, I just want to go, this is my preferred college. The risk is that it might be that the points for that particular college or those particular courses are higher than the average. I think the person can actually be applying for their dream courses towards the top of their CAO, more realistic courses in the middle, and some banker courses towards the bottom. So in a helpful way, what I'd be saying is, yes, let's aim for the courses in that college and the courses that you really want. We can't say for certain that the pattern of points were going to be the same for 2025 as they were. And obviously there's a slight reduction in the grades this year of 1.5%, but an increase of applications by about 6,000. So they might just net out. So the pattern of points might stay something similar. I'd be encouraging the student to say, literally, if you just go with that one college and the points are so high in that one college, you do need to prepare to have some safety backup courses underneath in perhaps some other colleges towards the bottom end of her list, so that she spreads the risk for herself. I hope that helps. I can sense it's just this one college that she wants to go to. I can appreciate that. So I could sense that a lot of the choices at the higher end of her CEO will be that, but then have other ones towards the bottom, maybe in other colleges where the points are slightly less. Thank you for that question. How will we deal with the fact that 20% of applicants from previous years where their significant grade inflation, and this is adding to the stress level for 2025, especially for aiming for high points? Yes, I think that this is absolutely the case. So what's happening is the State Exams Commission have advised that there's about a 7% increase from the 2024 leave insert above the level of 2019, and that they want to start a gliding process over the next number of years to come back to pre-COVID levels, because there's about a 60-point rise between 2019. So if we had two people, identical teachers and identical intelligence and so on, the 2019 person might have 400 points. The exact same person in 2024 would have 460. And there's a slight move back now because all of the other international European countries and the UK have moved back to 2019. And I think the Irish government is trying to come back to the 2019 profile on a gliding basis over a number of years. It is the case, and I've checked this, every year there's a rollover of applicants. So there will be the rollover of applicants this year, as there was a rollover from 2023 into 2024, as there will be a rollover from 2025 to 2026. There is an aspect of your daughter cannot control, she can only control the controllables. She can only control what she can do. It's highly unlikely that the State Exams Commission are going to change it because they've announced it now. And it is about basically saying being the best that she can be and making sure her CEO choices are structured in such a way that she has some backups to cover her. I've been told that the percentage of people applying from previous years is similar to what it has been in previous years. So there's not a huge spike this year. And so I hope that's helpful. Thank you for those questions. I'm just checking here now again for any other questions coming through. Can I clarify, if offered on the first round and then offered a higher choice in the second round, can the student stick with the first round offer, or do they have to accept the second round offer? Absolutely, categorically, the student can stay with the round one acceptance that they have. So let's say they got the third preference that I mentioned, and then in round two got their first preference. They can happily stay on the third preference, and the first preference offer will lapse. It has a shorter window of only 3 days. So 3 days, if she hasn't accepted, that lapses, and she's still in the third preference. So just to clarify, she's under no obligation to take the higher preference offer in a subsequent round. She can stick with the first choice that she, the choice, she can stick with the original choice she got in the initial round. I'm just looking here now. My daughter did very well in her mocks, but she wasn't happy. It seems to have knocked her confidence a bit. The approach I've taken to tell her that mocks can be more difficult and marked harder. Is that correct thing to say, or is a better way to me to handle it? I think that's a lovely. You're being extremely supportive. It is the case that not all students will have covered all of the material that happened on the mocks, and the sense themselves that they weren't, it was their first outing in the kind of real mock paper. And so often students coming back in the real thing can do better, and they've covered the material. And often as well, the teachers may have finished the curriculum about 2-3 weeks ago, and they've spent the last month in revision. So what's happened is a lot of revision has gone in, and taking mock papers and mock questions and so on. So I think you're factually true to say most students do better in the real thing. And you just have to be a little bit nuanced to say you can't say that for certain. But I think those words of encouragement to your daughter are absolutely wonderful. You're basically saying, well, the mocks was your first. You've now had experience of that. You've covered more material. There's now the more revision. And so effectively, I can sense her confidence has been knocked. It's okay to say that and to listen and acknowledge it, and just say, to build it, that to say there's a number of things that will help to build that confidence again. I hope that helps. Just working down through any other questions here. I think I've covered most of them. Jack, can you get a sense? I think have we covered most of the questions there?
Yeah, I think they've all been. Oh, sorry, there's one new just come in.
Okay, thank you, Jack. Bear with me a second. I'll just see. Is it at the top? Oh yeah, many of my daughter's friends stopped going to school at this stage. My daughter wants to do the same. Yeah, this is a really difficult one. It's very hard for me to say. It's really, and this is, yourself, I'm listening every day to our students. I'm listening to our teachers, and they're still wanting to go through, and they're going through past papers. My own sense is where I think the rigor and the structure and the aspect of the teaching and the aspect of being in school, I think is still the way to go, is my natural sense here. And I hear it all the time, but I really feel that the student will be much better advised to keep the attendance, to keep the support from the teachers, because the teachers are going through real material and real papers at this stage and taking, the important pieces coming through. So on balance, I'd be saying, like, schools will be wrapping up in the next fortnight, and there will be that fortnight up to the exams. So I think my advice would be to try and stay into the attendance and stay into the school would be my response on this. But I appreciate it's a difficult place that you're in. How do I keep my student motivated during exams? Yeah, no, I think we were talking about that whole 3 weeks of the exam period, and it might be that there's a week before the last exam. It might be religion or applied maths. I think it's around a structure, a timetable. We ourselves can appreciate if you don't have a structure, don't have a timetable, just time goes away. And they might say, well, listen, I'll start tomorrow. And then tomorrow will come and they'll go, no, I'll leave it until the next day. I'll have time. It's much easier to try and do the work and then take breaks. So effectively, I think working with your son or daughter, the young person, putting together the timetable, working with them to say this is, and then trying to stick to the timetable. I think structure and timetable will fill that gap between those periods of time to keep the momentum going. So important. Thank you for that. We're just approaching 7:10 now, and I think we're probably coming near the end. I think I've covered all the questions that have come in, Jack, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, there's no more there at the moment.
Okay. So if it's okay, folks, I think I'll wrap up by saying a thanks to my colleague, Jack Henderson, who joined me this evening. We'll send off the material to you. So this as a recording and the slides will go out to you tomorrow. Thank you very much for tuning in. And all that's left for me to do is to wish, your son or daughter, the young person in your house, the best of luck over the next few weeks. Importantly, wishing you as well, and self-care and compassion for you, and working together as a household to get through this stressful period, but in the full recognition that it's for a defined period of time and getting the support to get through it. So the best of luck, and thank you for joining us this evening. Thank you. Bye-bye.